Well, good morning, Rock Church. How's everybody doing? Good? Good to see you guys today. Hope you're having a fantastic weekend and enjoying just the beginning of your Sunday. If you're a regular attender, you know me. If you're new here, my name is Josh, and just an honor just to be able to welcome you to the Rock, and glad that you are with us today, and hope that you just have a great time. We're kind of at the beginning of a new series. We started it last week. It's called Shift, and it's this idea that there's points in our lives where we have to shift into a different gear, or we have to shift it into high gear, and we're going to be talking a lot about, maybe God's calling you to make some changes in your life. Maybe God's calling you to do something, to kind of change your mission and to make that shift. And we're using this theme. We just felt like it was a good time to introduce this theme because there's just a lot of shifts that are happening in our church right now. Over the last, month or two, and definitely heading into this summer, we're going to have to go through a lot of changes and a lot of shifts. So I thought this is a great series to help us do that. One shift that happened last week, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we have kind of rebranded, kind of relaunched our website, rockc3.com. Has anybody seen the new website, been to it? Come on, with me? Okay, a few of you. All those who didn't raise their hand, you need to go and check out our new website. You can do it right now if you want. You can take a little hiatus and go play on the web for a while. I don't mind, all right? Or do it after service, but definitely go and check out our new website. We redesigned it for a couple reasons. One, it's just good to get, fresh media out there. But also, our old website was not mobile friendly. And especially if you're a young adult, you know that the majority of websites you're going to now, you're doing it on your phone or on your iPad. So we wanted to make sure we had a mobile-friendly website. In addition to that, we also know that for people who are thinking about attending church, that they will go, statistics show that they're going to go to our website long before they come into the doors. So we wanted to make sure our website was very clear about what type of church we are, about what kind of worship we have, about who comes. And we really wanted people, when they check it out, for them to see that we're a come-as-you-are, casual type of church that focuses on Jesus Christ. And we want all people to come so that Jesus can do work in their lives. So we kind of retooled that. And I want to encourage you. But I also want to just take a second as I talk about that, just to say typically to do a website, it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to redo it. Well, we fortunately have a stud on our staff named Matt Brown. And Matt totally did our website for us. So let's just give it up for Matt right now. Yeah. Matt wears a lot of hats on our staff and in our church. He leads our student ministry team. He helps with teaching and preaching, but he's also very gifted at, things like that, technology. So he was able to redo our website for us, and meaning we weren't, able to do it in a good stewardship way. So just so thankful for the impact that the website's going to do for us going forward, and thankful for Matt doing that. But Matt and Kelly have even better news than just a website. And they announced this week that their adoption has now been finalized. Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. Because Matt and Kelly, they've known for months that they have a little girl. They know they have a daughter. But just a couple weeks ago, the country of India recognized that Matt and Kelly are now the parents of this little girl. So that's incredible. The only thing they're waiting on now is for the passport to be finalized for their little girl. And once it's done, they'll be leaving us for a few weeks and going over and bringing their daughter home. So let's give God praise for that. Yeah. It's awesome. It's awesome. And, bottom line, I said it first hour, but Matt's going to have to make some shifts in his life now. Because now no longer is he just a husband, but he's daddy. And that shift is going to happen because he's a dad. But it's even worse than that. Now he's outnumbered in the house, right? For those of you who have more females in your home than men, you know what I'm talking about. He's outnumbered, so he's going to have to make some shifts. He's going to have to make some changes. But I know that'll be easy for him because he's a kingdom-minded guy. that he has a heart for God, and he knows that his job as a man is to keep Christ as the focus of his house, for his family, for his relationship with his wife, but also now in his relationship with his daughter. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is this concept of what is really the purpose of life. What shifts do we have to make so that we understand, what our life should really be about? Because the majority of Americans, if I can at least put it in that terminology, we think that life is all about being successful. And, we do all kinds of things in lives to make sure that we're successful, that however you want to measure success, that's my purpose, that's my goal, whether it's success in my job or success in my career or success in my schooling or success financially or success as a dad or success as a husband. And what I want to challenge us with this morning is to kind of leave the mindset of searching for success and grab a hold of the mindset to make a shift to the mindset of significance. Probably the easiest way for me to say it is we need to shift our mission. We need to go from having this idea of my mission is to be successful to my mission is to be significant. And I really started wrestling with this. It was when I turned 40. And for those of you who are close to my age bracket, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You hit that point in your life where you're just like, dude, I'm like halfway there. You know what I mean? Like this is like midpoint, in typical life expectancy. And I remember I was 40, I was sitting on a beach, and I started wrestling with this idea of, this is what I've been doing, and what do I need to be doing? And I wrestled with this idea of significance and success and all that. At the same time that I was sitting on that beach when I turned 40, I was reading a book, and the book was called Halftime. So very, made sense of why I was reading at that point in my life. And it was a great book by a guy named Bob Buford. Now, Bob Buford was a guy who wrestled with the very same thing. Bob had been extremely successful all of his life. He lived in Tyler, Texas, and he had started a TV a TV studio. And it was, I can't remember if it was an ABC or CBS affiliate, but it was one of those. And he had made a decent amount of money running this TV station. But in addition to that, then cable started hitting, so he started buying up all these cable companies around America, and he went from being wealthy to being extremely wealthy and being extremely successful. He had all this money, he had all this success in the world's eyes, yet he kept wrestling with, man, there's something that I'm missing. He was being a good dad, a good husband. He loved God, but he hadn't allowed his love for God to really push through his entire life. It was kind of compartmentalized. And he started wrestling with that, going, man, I feel like there's more that God is calling me to with my life. I've been very successful, but that's not enough. And then in the midst of him struggling with that, a tragedy hit. He had one son, one child, and his child was a son. His son had graduated from college, went into the financial markets, and was living in Colorado and was doing very well, was making hundreds of thousands of dollars. His son loved Christ, was living a good life, was doing things according to the Lord, but his son also loved to chase adventure. And when he was 24, if I remember right, maybe he was 25, he decided that he would try to swim across the Rio Grande, right? Not real good decision, but a risk taker that he was, he tried it. And in the midst of doing that, he drowned and died. Well, that left Bob sitting at that point in his life where now he's halfway through life and now he's lost his son. And he started really evaluating, my mission in life has been to be successful. Now I'm realizing my mission should be a life of significance. And how do we do that? How do we leave this idea and shift to this idea of significance? Well, what it'll come down to is, what are you doing with Jesus Christ? And what are you doing for Jesus Christ? And when we start realizing that if I live my life to advance the gospel by living for Christ and working for Christ, then I will have a significant impact. Well, what Bob ended up doing is he sold all of his businesses, made millions of money on the sale of those, and then took that money and reinvested it into kingdom work type projects, nonprofits and Christian ministries. And he started infusing all of his time, and that's what he does. And he leads several of those ministries now, even at his age of today. And I think many of us need to make that same shift. I'm not saying you need to change careers or sell your business or do any of that. But what I am saying is we need to look at what we have in life and say, how do I use this for kingdom purposes? God has given each and every one of us gifts. He's given each and every one of us responsible ways to use those gifts and kingdom ways to use those. So we need to make a shift from using the gifts that I have to be successful to using the gifts that I have to having a significant impact on people according to the gospel. And we see that as it's played out in Paul's life in Philippians chapter 1. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and turn there. We're going to spend the rest of our time really wrestling through just a couple of verses in Philippians chapter 1. Now, our whole series over the next 6 weeks is going to be built out of Philippians. So we'll kind of work through the book of Philippians over the next month and a half. Today, we'll just be in chapter 1 and in a few verses of it, okay? So if you have a Bible, you can go there. If you don't have one, I would encourage you to just download a Bible app on your phone or the Rock C3 app, and there's a scripture right there that you can grab, all right? Philippians chapter 1, verse 12 kind of gives Paul's decision of this is how I'm going to live my life. He says, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. Paul realizes significance is found in advancing the gospel. Verse 13, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. Paul has recognized that his life now is all about living for Christ. So if you want to make a shift of significance, then it starts by realizing my goal in life, my job in life, my mission in life is to live for Christ. And we see how he says that in verse 20 through 24. It says this, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with full courage now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Let me reread that verse because that's kind of our verse of the crux of this whole message this morning. For me to live is Christ. To live is Christ. That is now his mission. And to die is gain. If I am to, verse 22, if I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which shall I choose? I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and to be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain in the flesh is even more necessary on your account. So Paul says that he's wrestling with this idea of live for Christ or die for Christ, all right? Now, let's back up to make sure we catch Paul's story here, all right? Paul is a perfect analogy of a person who made a shift in his mission from success to significance. You see, Paul, when he was younger, he was called Saul, all right? That was his kind of name, and then it got changed to Paul later on. But I'm just going to use the name Paul because it'll make it easier to understand. Paul, when he was younger, he grew up in a town called Tarsus, okay? Now, Tarsus was kind of a Roman colony, but he was Jewish. So as a young boy, he knew 3 languages, all right? Now, I struggle enough with English. I can't imagine knowing 3 languages, but he knew Hebrew because he was Jewish of descent, okay? So he knew Hebrew. He also knew Latin, and then he also knew what was called Koine Greek. Now, Koine Greek is what you'd call kind of street Greek, just common Greek. Easiest way for me to illustrate that is with the English language. You know how we have Old English, and then we also have like American English, and then there's really another one called Horry County English, right? Y'all know what I'm saying. I've learned some nice Horry County words since being here. So we have these different kinds of English language. Well, in Greek, it's the same way. You would have what would be formal Greek, like the formal way to speak Greek. But then you have Koine Greek, and Koine Greek was just the language of common man. It's like you're out on the street, that's the way they would talk the Greek language. And because of where he lived, he had to have that knowledge of that language. Now, the interesting thing is that's the language that the New Testament is written in as well. It's written in common Greek language, which I love because it means that the Bible is for common people. And I'm very common, and we are all common. So the Bible is for us. Moving on, that's not even part of the sermon. That was free. But anyway, so Paul is a very successful man, all right? So we know that he knows at least 3 languages. As he was growing up, became a teenager, he went to learn under a guy named Gamaliel, who was a big-time teacher, and he studied under him, learned under him philosophy and thoughts and all this stuff. When he was done there, he went on to become a Pharisee. Now, a Pharisee would be kind of a leader of the Hebrew people, of the Jewish people. There would be what we'd call Pharisees and Sadducees. It helps if I put it in like American governmental terms. Pharisees, Sadducees, think Senate, House of Reps, or House of Representatives, all right? They were these kind of leaders of the people. They kind of knew the laws. They kind of, knew what was going on. The Pharisees were very strict in the learning of the law. So for Paul to be a Pharisee, he had to memorize the first 5 books of the Bible. That's what's called the written law. He had to memorize it. Now, when I say memorize it, I mean word for word, comma for comma, period for period. He had to have complete rote memory of the entire first 5 books of the Bible. All right? But in addition to that, the Pharisees also believed in what was called an oral law. Because the Pharisees, their whole goal in life was to protect the law, to help people not break the law. So they came up with a secondary law, what we would call today legalism, and they put it in front of the law. So where the law would say don't work on the Sabbath, the Pharisees would say, well, don't even untie your donkey or your colt or your oxen on the Sabbath. And they came up with that law to keep people from going all the way over here. So Paul also had to memorize all of that. So he had an incredible mind. He had reached that pinnacle to the point that some people, many people actually I should say, would believe that he was also part of the Sanhedrin. Now the Sanhedrin was a council of 71. And again, if I could put it in our governmental system, they would be the Supreme Court. They were the ones that were truly in charge of all of the Jewish people when it came down to making decisions. And many people would say that Paul was part of that council, and they would say it based off a couple things. One, there was a guy in the Bible named Stephen who was killed because of his belief in Jesus. He was on trial in front of the Sanhedrin, and Paul was there. And while the Sanhedrin decided to kill Stephen, they laid their cloaks, they laid their clothes at the feet of Paul, saying basically Paul was the one who said to do this. So that kind of shows us that there's a good chance he was part of that group. When the Sanhedrin decided to go to Damascus to kill the Christians, they sent Paul. All right? So there's probably a good reason to believe that Paul was part of that council. I say all this to say this. Paul had reached the pinnacle of success for a Hebrew man, for a Jewish person. He was at the top. There was like nothing else he could do. And then one day he was on his road to Damascus, and he saw a bright light come out of the sky. He heard a voice that said, Saul, Saul, Paul, why do you persecute me? Well, Paul replies back, well, Lord, who is it that I'm persecuting? He said, it is Jesus of Nazareth. Now get up and shift. Now get up and change your mission. Do not go to Damascus to kill Christians. Change your mission. Become a Christian. Become somebody who is following me. So Paul got up, he went, he heard the gospel message, he repented, he was baptized, and then he learned all about Christ. Paul made this huge shift in the middle of his life from success to significance. Because for the rest of his life, he went around preaching the gospel. For the rest of his life, he lived out verse 21. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. As long as I'm alive, I'm doing it for Christ. If good things are happening, I'm doing it for Christ. If bad things are happening, I'm doing it for Christ. Remember, he wrote this while he was in jail. He wrote this while he was in prison. He had this bad circumstance, this horrible circumstance happening in his life. And in the midst of that circumstance, he gave glory and pointed to Jesus Christ. Now, let me just let everybody in on a secret that we probably all already know. When it comes to bad things happening in your life, everybody gets a turn. Who's had a turn? Who's lost a loved one? Who's had to deal with some bad health news? You know what I'm talking about. Everybody gets their turn. Paul was no different. He was getting his turn. And in the midst of that, he said, Jesus is being preached. He used his life to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. He used his life for the mission of Christ as a kingdom worker to make a significant impact. And then he even said this, and then if death comes, well, that's even greater. Now, let's see this. It says this in verse 23. I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. All right, now, understand, Paul's not being morbid here. He's in jail. And the majority of people back then who went to jail died of capital punishment or died in jail, all right? So Paul's not having this big morbid thought. He's just like, man, there's a good chance death is right in front of me. And if that happens, I get to be with Jesus. And then that is far greater than anything else in life. Let me just kind of take a pause here for a second. Because Paul points to something that I think is huge. One of the greatest gifts that you can give to somebody else is their knowledge of knowing where you will spend eternity. Think about that for a second. The greatest, or one of the greatest gifts that you can give somebody is their knowledge of knowing where you will spend eternity. Paul was not worried about death because he knew, man, death doesn't scare me. I get to be with Jesus. I know what's coming next. And I'm telling you all, this is where I'm headed. Guys, I've done many funerals as a pastor, and I've done several where there's been no hope, where that person died, had no relationship with Jesus Christ. The family, the people who were there had no relationship with Jesus. And guys, I can tell you there was great grief and great mourning, and there was all kinds of questions going on in that room. But I've also done a lot of funerals for people who are God-fearing individuals, people who have put their hope in Christ. And you know what? There's still grieving going on because that happens when someone you love passes away. That's natural, and it's the proper thing to do to grieve. But if you'd ask those people, they go, we didn't lose somebody. We know right where they are. And when you know right where that loved one is, you grieve, but you don't grieve as someone without hope. You grieve as somebody going, I know right where they are, and one day we'll be reunited because I know where I'm headed. Make sure that you do what you need to do with Christ so that you leave somebody else with that great knowledge of where you'll spend eternity. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give somebody upon your death. Because one day death will hit. And Paul says that. One day I'll die, and when I die, I get to be with Jesus. But until then, I live for Christ. Until then, I will live and do fruitful labor. So make a shift in your mission from success to significance by living for Christ. Well, how do I live for Christ? I work for him. How do I live for him? I work for him. Probably the best way to say it is just to look at verse 27. Verse 27 kind of lays out for us ways that we can work for Christ, ways that we basically live for Christ, all right? And there's three different things in this verse I want us to see. The first part says this: above all, you must live as citizens of heaven. Citizens, let's put some different words in there for what citizen means. Above all, you must be devoted to heaven. Above all, you must have an allegiance to heaven, to the kingdom. Probably makes sense if I use that word kingdom there. Above all, you must be a protector of those in heaven. A citizen comes with that idea, if you look it up in the dictionary, this idea of allegiance, devotion, protection of something. Well, how are you doing with that? How am I doing with that? When we think about allegiance, allegiance means you belong. It means that you wear the name of Christ. I've told this to my kids before, you wear the name of Finkley. Wear it well. Make sense? Like you wear that name, so wear it well. We wear the name of Christ. Let's wear it well. Let's show that we truly do have an allegiance to Christ, and let's wear his name well. The other thing says citizenship, it kind of has this idea of devotion to it, this idea of being devoted. And if you're devoted, it means that you're willing to work. It means that you're willing to serve. It means that you're willing to stand and to take care of whatever need is needed there, to fulfill whatever need. And as we are living for Christ, then we are devoted to Christ. And the way that we often show that devotion is how we live it out in the church. The way we live it out in the church and the way we serve at church and be on board for mission, and whether that's serving here inside these walls of our church and our kids ministry or our parking team or our greeters or sound and tech, whether it's inside or whether it's outside. It's doing things, out in our community, and we're serving under the name of Christ because we're devoted to the kingdom. If you're a citizen, then you're saying, I have an allegiance to the kingdom. I'm devoted to the kingdom. It also means that I'll protect the kingdom, all right? If we're a citizen, then we understand the protection of our nation. And we have men and women who sign up to go in the military because they say, I'm a citizen of America, so I'm going to fight for America. I'm going to protect America. In the same way that we as citizens of heaven, we need to protect what's going on in the church. Now, guys, let me tell you, the number one way to protect what's happening in church is be unified. Let me read a little bit further in that verse, and it explains this. It says this, then, whether I come and see you again or only hear about you, I will know that you are standing together with one spirit, one purpose, fighting together. Catch that? Standing together in one spirit, with one purpose, fighting together for the faith, which is the good news. Paul says here in this scripture, the way to protect one another, the way to protect the church is to be unified. Disunity is probably the biggest, destroyer of the church, is when people are disunified. So we've got to constantly, as a church, fight for unity in the way that we do church and the way that we are on board for mission. I remember for years serving in Illinois at a great church, and unity was the number one thing that the elders always focused on. Because they would say this, that if there's unity in the eldership, that will breed unity in the staff. And if there's unity in the staff, that will breed unity in our church. And if there's unity in our church, that means we're healthy, and healthy things grow. Make sense? Guys, I can stand on this stage, and I am so thankful that I can say this, that it wasn't just a lesson that I learned when I was in Illinois. It's the truth of what's happening right here. That there is 100% unity in our eldership. That we are locked arms marching together. And that unity breeds 100% unity in our staff, where we lock arms and we walk together on mission. And I can say as a church, I firmly believe we are 100% in unity as a church as we are walking towards our mission, which means we are healthy and God causes healthy things to grow. Isn't that a beautiful thing? We always have to keep unity on the forefront. And the way we find our unity is by sticking to the mission of God. We work for Christ as citizens. The last thing I'll say about that idea of living for Christ. So you live for Christ as a citizen. You're working together. You're conducting yourself in devotion and all that. And then there's this last part of this verse that I haven't read yet because it's the part of the verse that scares me. The first part, be a citizen. All right, good. The last part, be unified. Yeah, makes total sense. It's this couple little words that drive me nuts. I'll start over with verse 27. Above all, you must live as citizens of heaven, conducting yourself in a manner worthy of the good news about Christ. The ESV says it this way, conducting yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel. Guys, that's a scary verse. Because you know what that verse really means? The Koine Greek language there for worthy means measure. It means you're being measured. What that verse is really saying is, do you measure up to Christ being willing to die on the cross for you? Now, let's first be honest. We all know we don't measure up, and that's why we have to have Christ. But the verse, what it's saying is, because Christ died, are you measuring up? And you'd say, well, how do I know if I've measured up? Well, you're going to be measured. You're going to be weighed. It's this idea of scales, all right? That's what the Koine Greek, when it says measure up, it's talking about scales. Like, do the scales measure up? The way you're going to be weighed, the way you're going to be measured, the way I'm going to be measured is on these two premises. What did I do with Christ? And what did I do for Christ? What did I do with Christ? And what did I do for Christ? What do I do with Christ means, have I responded to his free gift of grace? Have I surrendered my life to his lordship? Have I said, Jesus, I'm a sinner, I've got a bunch of trash in my life, and I need you as my Savior? All right, that is the saving act. What I do with Christ is going to be about salvation. What I do for Christ is going to be about what I did after I was saved, okay? So what I do for Christ is not about my salvation, because our salvation is a free gift of God on him alone. But once you are saved, then it should cause us to say, I want to do things for Christ. And God's going to look, and he's going to measure of what did we do for him once that we were saved in him. And that's scary. Because I want to make sure in my life that I have done with Christ and for Christ everything that says, yes, I am worthy of the gospel. Which is so weird for me to say because, man, I'm such a dirty, rotten, nasty sinner. And I go, well, how in the world can I be worthy? Well, God said I am worthy when I surrender to him. I'm forgiven and I'm washed clean. And he looks at me as a soul that is saved. So I'm so thankful for that. And because of that, I go, well, then, man, I want to work for him. I want to do kingdom work that it leaves a significant impact on other people's lives. What about you? Will you make the shift? Will you shift your mission from success to significance? One other story is about a guy. His name was Billy Borden. You might have heard his story before. It's quite famous. It comes from the Borden dairy family. So Billy Borden was a young man, and he was in line to take over the industry and to be, have money galore, millions of dollars, and to be extremely wealthy and successful. When he was a teenager, he got turned on fire for Christ. He graduated from high school early, and as a 16-year-old, because of the wealth of the family, he was given a trip by his parents as a graduation present around the world. Yeah, you're like, Mom, I'm graduating, But you might not have the same kind of funds that Billy's family did. But his parents, as a 16-year-old student, he got to travel the world. He went to Europe. He went to Africa. He went to Asia. And as a teenager, as he was going through the world, he saw the needs of people and his heart broke. And he said, I've got to be a kingdom worker. I don't want to go back and run a dairy business. I want to be a missionary. And as a teenager, he made that decision to say, I'm going to leave this successful life that I've already got in store for me because I want to do something that has a significant impact on others. And he went home and he told his parents that, and his dad got ticked. His dad's like, what? You go chase that dream, but you're going to get no money. He said, well, Dad, I plan on still going to college. He goes, you go to college, but you chase that dream afterwards. Ain't going to be nothing for you. Billy went, and the story goes that he grabbed his Bible. He opened it up, and in the front cover, he wrote, no reserves. And he took off to Yale. While he was at Yale, he led many people to Christ. They say that 75% of the population of Yale, the student body of Yale, were in Bible studies by his senior year that he had started. When he graduated from Yale, he went on to Princeton Theological Seminary. When he got done with Princeton, he had all kinds of job offers. And saying no to each job offer, and then looking at his dad, who was saying, come on, come work for me. He said no, and his dad said, you'll never work for this company again. And then he went back to his Bible, and then underneath the words, no reserves, he wrote, no retreats. And he took off for the mission field. He was heading towards Asia, but on his way to Asia, he said he wanted to stop in Egypt and minister to the Muslim people. So he started to learn the language. And while he was there, he caught meningitis, a death sentence. And he died at the age of 24, 25 years of age. But right before he died, they found another inscription in his Bible. 2 more words, no regrets. No reserves, no retreats, no regrets. He had made a decision as a young man to shift his mission from success to significance. And his story now has been preached for years all around the world. What about us? Will we make the shift? You know, we're going to have a time of response here in just a second. And there's some shifts that we need to make in our mission. And we need to shift over to that idea of making a significant impact for the kingdom. But the first shift might be asking yourself, what have I done with Christ? What have I done with him? And this morning, I'll just say this. If you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, today's a perfect day to make that shift. Make that change. And say, Jesus, I want to do something with you. I need to surrender to your lordship. And I'd encourage you while we're singing maybe to come up front where all this trash is, all this paper goods, and just kneel down and dump out your trash. Lay your sin down at the foot of this stage. And then get up and leave it there because Jesus is taking care of it. I encourage you, maybe if you do that, then walk over and talk to some of us over here at this corner. We're willing to pray with you, or stop by the orange tent because we'd like to pray with you and help you take those steps in surrendering your life to Jesus Christ. For others of us, we just need to shift this idea of what are we doing for him. And God has wired you. He's given you gifts. He's given you passions. He's given you things in your life. What are you doing for Jesus with them? Maybe there's some shifts that need to happen this morning. Why don't you do me a favor? Let's stand up. There's communion to the right and left of the stage. If you'd like to take communion, if you'd like to come up front and spend some time with Jesus and do that, you're welcome to. If you'd like to come up and pray with us, you're welcome to do that as well. But let's take this time and let's totally focus in on Jesus Christ. Let's worship him. Let's celebrate him. And let's let him do some changes in our life. Pray with me. Father God, I thank you for this morning that we can come into your presence. And God, I pray right now that through this time of worship, that we'll make some shifts in our life. That we'll evaluate what are we doing with you. And then we'll evaluate what are we doing for you. And then we'll do it. God, thank you for your amazing grace. It's in your son's name I pray. Let's respond.